Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Last Week in Denmark podcast. This is Golda. I'm here with Dominika, and we're going to be doing episode 6 of season 4. Hey, Dominika, how are you today? How was your week?
Hey, my week was really great. I was enjoying the last rays of sunshine of this year, probably, and the really nice autumn we have. And I'm very excited to be here doing my very first episode at Last Week in Denmark.
Wow, it is your first episode. Well, we are so happy that you would like to join our team and looking forward to working on these episodes with you. So today we have 3 very interesting topics. 1, Denmark is looking to set up a new screening for new citizens. 2, Denmark explores assisted dying. That's going to be an interesting one. And 3, many people in Denmark are looking to sleep under the stars. Let's just dive right into the first topic, which is screening for new citizens. The Danish government has set up an expert group to consider whether applications for Danish citizens should be screened for anti-democratic views. Denmark is already known as having one of the toughest citizenship regimes in Europe. This includes language tests, residency requirements, employment criteria. So right now, the question is, where do we draw the line between safeguarding democracy and policing thought or belief? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you put it very well. I also have very mixed feeling on this. We don't know why exactly they're doing it. I think the intentions of this are good, but I also think that this could really quickly become, a very slippery slope. On one hand, there's, of course, certain core values that we all need to agree on, like, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, children's rights. But I do think in some ways this could become a very dangerous precedent, because I also think that the word democratic is a very subjective word. And I think, depending on who is in power, this could be defined in very different ways. And also, as you said, the Danish citizenship test is already very tough, and it already has questions regarding Danish values. So I think adding sort of an extra element to this, an extra sort of barrier is a bit weird.
Yeah. And I always have a feeling that when things like this come up, it's because there's this threat of immigrants coming into the country and potentially having some beliefs or values that the majority does not deem as democratic. And as you said so nicely, it becomes a slippery slope because it can be subjective, right? So the right to vote, the right to be heard, freedom of speech, all this falls under democracy, but freedom of speech for whom, right? So it becomes, okay, you have the freedom to say what you want. But if I now say, hey, I want to wear a hijab because, this is something that is core to my faith, then is that anti-democratic?
Yeah.
Not necessarily, but this is where we potentially can end up. And I think with all the rise of extremism, across Europe, I see why the concern is coming. I see that there's this back and forth battle of keeping the Danish national identity versus what it actually means when people who may not look like you are also being called Danish, like myself.
For sure.
Yeah, it really risks stigmatizing minorities, minority groups, and it blurs the line between what is free speech and what is acceptable views. And how would they test that? Are they going to start looking at our social media? How will you actually know? Right?
Yeah. So actually, I was looking a bit into this because I was curious why they would do this in the first place. And apparently, one of the things that sort of started this process was that last year there was around 2,000 people eligible for citizenship. And out of those 2,000 people, there were 3 who have written something exactly on their social media, which was not according to, Danish values and Danish rules. And it was actually Liberal Alliance and the Conservative Party that have said that maybe we should have an extra level of sort of screening interviews for these people.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. So they are looking at people's social media. Interesting.
Yeah. Not too great. And I think, also, like you said, when you mentioned the hijab, I think a lot of these, rules and regulations, they're very often, unfortunately, targeted, at Muslims, for example. It was actually the Danish Minister of Immigration, who's part of the Social Democrats. He said that, this is a quote, some totalitarian attitudes among a minority of Muslims, which are unacceptable and we must speak out against. But at the same time, it was not described what these attitudes are. So I think that does beg the question, like, why are they doing this?
And I think the why is important. I'm happy that you kind of brought up that quote because it really does speak into the intention. Why? Because if you say a small minority, then is this really an issue that we have to bring in a whole new policy? But again, if there are some underlying biases already in place, then this is just another reason to continue down that line.
Yeah, for sure. I think, there's always going to be some isolated cases, right? And I think to sort of extract these cases, from any community and turn this into kind of a nationwide law, I do think that is also a bit extreme in itself.
And interestingly enough, Denmark is saying that they do need internationals. We need people to come to support our economic growth. And a lot of the workforce right now is not being balanced by the fact that many young people are not wanting to work straight out of college. They're exploring the world. They're getting to know themselves, taking several different educations. So internationals or expats come in and are immigrants. And then what message are you now sending in terms of the pathway to citizenship or the long-term plans of these immigrants when there's it becomes such a hard process to really settle and feel Danish? I think this is food for thought.
Yeah, for
what
sure.
about you?
For sure. I think especially for, non-EU immigrants, I think, because I'm from the EU, it's always been easier for me. But I think, especially for someone who's outside of the EU, it does send a message that it's really hard.
That is so unfortunate. But that brings us into the next topic, which is something else that is very, very controversial.
Yeah.
Maybe just as much, which is Denmark explores assisted dying. A cross-ministerial working group has been tasked with mapping possible models for legalizing euthanasia in Denmark. For a long time, Denmark has debated assisted dying, but never moved forward. Now, with an aging population and public opinion shifting, the government is ready to explore it more seriously. We have Finland and Sweden that do not allow euthanasia, but have a strong palliative care. Norway is also restrictive. The Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and more recently Spain are allowing some forms of assisted dying. What do you think about this?
I think, to be honest, it is high time. I do think that, assisted dying is, it is a part of healthcare. And also, something I was looking into, which I think is worth mentioning, is that there is a difference between euthanasia and assisted dying, where euthanasia is the doctor actively being with you in the process of dying and giving you the medicines needed to do that. And assisted dying is when you're just given those medicines yourself and you take them yourself. And then you're sort of, someone assists you in that. And I think that is quite a significant difference. And I do know that, also the Ministry of Health is also looking into those two different things, whether either or both of those could be an option in Denmark.
Okay, I did not know that at all. Thank you for that information. I just always imagined that it is someone who at any age feels that they would want a medical professional to kind of just put them under. But it's interesting to note that there's actually the option of you doing it yourself. If we extend the lengths of autonomy and bodily autonomy, it is, I am also choosing the time that I go, right?
For sure.
Like I said, it has been something that's been discussed. I personally also believe that people should have the right to do it. However, I think what I have seen in the discussion is that people feel that if we legalize it, more people will be encouraged to do it, which begs another question of why more people would want to leave this earth, right? And are people just tolerating life at this point? Are we stripping people from the dignity of how they die? Are some people, left to kind of accept suffering rather than getting the relief from suffering? It's a really interesting perspective. And I think having more countries kind of taking this seriously could tie into potentially suicide prevention or how we deal with mental health. Prevention is the best way forward, but I think this brings in also a holistic perspective of what happens before people get to that point. But if they are at that point where they make this decision, how can it be done in the safest possible way and maybe incorporate family members? That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's, it's like with a lot of things in medicine, like abortion, for example, where, banning it does not make it go away, but it just makes it less safe. And I think, this could also be this case where, making it legal could make it more safe and comfortable for people. I think there are a lot of arguments saying that people could then, be forced to do it, if you're vulnerable, if you're, if your family or whoever doesn't want to take care of you. But I think there's already so many countries who have done this in a proper way, like the Netherlands, for example. It's been legal in the Netherlands since 2002, and they have like a whole process that you have to go through in order to get to that point. You need at least 2 doctors to sign off on it. You have to be in unbearable suffering. It's called. There has to be, no prospect of improvement. So there are guardrails which you can introduce to make sure that nobody who's in a vulnerable state is forced to do it.
Yeah. No, those are really, really good points. I didn't even think about the fact that, yes, people could also be pressured to do it, which they are now with all the threats that people get online. But I like the fact that, there's certain path procedures you have to go through for people to really assess that, okay, yes, we will help you with this. This is interesting. I'm going to have to read up on it a bit more, especially with the Netherlands that you mentioned. But yeah, it is, as you said, if we ban it, it's still going to happen, sadly, but not in a dignified way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think one more interesting thing to add to this, which I was reading about in some of the news, is that this working group that is looking into whether euthanasia should be legal in Denmark, they are actually expected to complete their work within 2 years, which is a lot of time to do the research. So I think it's also important to mention that this is not something that Denmark is sort of considering very willy-nilly and it's going to happen tomorrow, but it is a process that is going to take a lot of time.
Yeah, that's a very good point to make as well. And Denmark has long been seen as a progressive welfare state, so I would even be shocked if it was such a rushed process. I think it's good that it's given its time to have all the research and that it's evidence-based, and whatever conclusions, of course, will also involve the citizens of Denmark.
Exactly. 100%.
Well, I was going to say, talk of dying, sleep is probably the less long-term version of that. And sleeping under the stars is becoming the new thing. I thought this was quite an interesting topic personally, because When I first read Sleeping Under the Stars, I thought, are people taking their blankets or just going outside? Are they reminiscing on when they were kids and they were kids and their parents put them outside? But more and more Danes are spending nights in shelters, actually, and campsites, which are managed by the Danish Nature Agency. And interesting number, it says here the summer saw a record of 51,633 overnight stays. Post-pandemic habits, cost of living pressures, and a growing love for friluftsliv, the Nordic philosophy of outdoor life. Yeah, is this something you have done before? Have you ever been hiking or sleeping in a shelter outside?
I'm not a very outdoorsy person, to be honest, so not so much. I think whenever I see news like this, I find it very interesting that, Denmark is such a wealthy country and, we still do all of these things which are, very sort of down to earth and free and very, accessible for everyone. I think comparing it to my home country, which is Poland, which is significantly less wealthy than Denmark. We have so many less activities like this that, that are accessible to everyone where, you don't have to pay. So I think this is really one of those really nice things about Denmark that, there are these activities that everyone can do, which, yeah, at the same time, I've never considered myself.
Yeah, it is really interesting how rich nations are slowly reverting to some of the basic habits of human nature. That's what I would say. There was also at one point, there was this growing trend of walking around with no shoes on.
Yeah.
And it just really gets you thinking that with all the evolution we're going through with technology and what we're building and modernization, urbanization, there's still something within us as humans that brings us back to the basic ways of life.
For sure.
And it's really amazing that I have always said myself that at the end of the day, you will always see human nature in whichever community you go to. But also this recognition of, just being outside with all our screens and everything, people still find pleasure in just being outside. Because I'm reading here, it's like families, hikers, everybody just wants like a quick escape, and tourists also do this. Imagine paying money to go sleep in the forest somewhere.
Yeah. And I think another thing about this, which is really nice, which I have to mention because I do work in the sustainability industry, is that, it's so sustainable because there's a lot. I actually checked on the map. There's a lot of these shelters and camping places all around Copenhagen. So, instead of flying off, to Barcelona or wherever for the weekend, you just take your bike or the train and, you have a weekend 20 minutes away for free, basically, which I think is, very nice and maybe an underappreciated element of that too.
That's so nice. So where is it that you work, actually?
I work at a company that does carbon removal. So it's not really related to this, but I think, all sustainability topics, they are in some way connected to each other.
Yeah, I completely agree. Okay, so we are coming to a natural end to this episode. We just want to say thank you for everyone who tuned in, and we hope that you'll continue to tune in to Last Week in Denmark podcast. Thank you and have a great week.
Hey, this is Kalpita and Golda, co-hosts of the Last Week in Denmark podcast. Did you know Last Week in Denmark offers sponsored content in the newsletter? Our reporters are producing original articles and content tailored for internationals in Denmark.
So if you have a business our readers should know about, let us write about it. get in touch with us at reporter@lwid.dk. You can also reach out to us on LinkedIn and Instagram at Last Week in Denmark.